All right, everybody. Welcome once again to Critical Thinking, Philosophy 210. I'm Professor Curran, and this week I'm going to walk you through the second part of the unit, which deals with logical fallacies. So you got a number of choices here. You can watch the provided lecture, which is great, gives you some interesting insights. If that didn't make it clear enough, you can watch my video. When you're done watching this video or done studying the unit, I have prepared a review for the quiz this week, which I think is really helpful. So if you have an opportunity before you take the quiz, please review the review that I put up on the video. That will be extremely helpful, I think, when you take the quiz. So anyway, there we go. Let's talk a little bit about the topic today. I'm going to get rid of the official welcome here to something called logical fallacies. Now, earlier in the week, we spent some time talking about the form of arguments with categorical syllogism. And we looked to see that if the form wasn't correct, the argument itself would not be valid. Okay? And one of the challenges a lot of people have is they look at the premises and they go, oh, this can't be true, this can't be true, so the argument's invalid. The first part of the week, it was just about form. Okay? Now, we're going to get a little bit more into the content and look and see if indeed, if the content isn't correct, the argument also may not be valid. So, there are a number of fallacies that are discussed. And what exactly is a fallacy? For lack of a better term, it's faulty reasoning. Okay, so there's a number of terms for fallacies. That's certainly an easy one to understand. So if the reasoning is faulty, if the premises are faulty, if the logic leading from the premises to the conclusion is faulty, the whole argument may indeed be faulty. So let's take a look at some and see which ones we want to talk about. The first is something called fallacy of division. Okay? What's a fallacy of division? The fallacy of division basically says this: just because something is true about the whole unit, that does not mean it is equally true of its component parts. Okay? Human beings are made up of atoms. Okay? Therefore, I'm made up of atoms. Atoms are invisible. Therefore, I am invisible. Okay? Just because I am visible does not mean that my component parts are visible. Okay? So, in this case, this is different from another fallacy we're going to talk about. It's reverse, which is the fallacy of composition. And the fallacy of division, again, dividing it down further. What is true of the total, the whole, me, is not necessarily true of my component parts. I am visible. I am made up of atoms. Okay? Atoms are invisible. So what is true of me, visibility, is not necessarily true of my component parts, my atoms. Okay? So that's what's called the fallacy of division. One of the ones you will see a lot, and I know there's a couple of these on the quiz this week, is something called circular reasoning. In circular reasoning, what you do is the conclusion usually is hidden actually in the premise. So you can't really do that. The premises must lead you to the conclusion, but you can't make the conclusion in the premise. Okay? So if I say, people who are happy in their work are happy because they enjoy their work. Now, that sounds reasonable, right? But it is not a valid argument, because you've already stated the conclusion, people are happy in their work, and then you said the reason for it is because they're happy in their work. That just spins round and round in a circle, and it's not a valid form for an argument. Okay? You will also see a number of fallacies like this, called the either-or fallacy. In an either-or fallacy, you present two possible outcomes, okay, based on something. So, I can say, if we don't have school prayer in our public schools, our society will fall apart. Okay? So either we have prayer or our society falls apart. Now, there are a number of reasons why, and hold that thought while I get my customary drink of coffee. That's good stuff. So there are a number of reasons why our society could fall apart. Lack of prayer may be one of them. Okay? But when you say an either-or fallacy, you basically have said that if this, then this, and there's no other possible options. Okay? So in making an argument like this, what you're basically forcing the reader to do is to accept the fact that your original premise, we must have prayer in the school, is valid, because if you don't accept that, then all of a sudden you're forced to the or part, which is our society is going to fall apart. So in this case, that type of reasoning is not sound reasoning, because there are all sorts of other possibilities there. Okay? So those are some of the fallacies that we have this week. Now there's a number of others. And one of the tricks to these, a lot of these are very similar. And you have to be real careful. What I would do if I were taking the quiz, I would almost do it by process of elimination. Like when you look at them, there's some you can clearly say this is not what it is. And that's sometimes an easier way to do the quiz. One of the other fallacies, which is similar to what I'm going to talk about later, is the hasty generalization. Now, in the hasty generalization, you make a statement or form a conclusion based on a sample size that is really too small to make such a conclusion based on. Okay? Let's say, for example, I'm teaching a class and one student cheats on a test. And it's a female student. So I assume, okay, well clearly then, females cheat more than men. Right? Is that true? Well, I don't know. It may or may not be true, but I cannot say it based on 1, 2, 3 incidences. So this is very similar, by the way, to stereotyping, right? So if you have one bad experience or one type of experience, you take that experience and say, aha, that must apply to the entire group. That is a hasty generalization and not sound reasoning. Okay? So 1 or 2 incidences. Now again, if you have a lot, if 99 out of 100 people say X, then it's not a hasty generalization to say with this group, I can say with a high degree of probability whatever it is. But with very small sample sizes, that forms what's called a hasty generalization. Now, I've mentioned this one earlier. There's also the fallacy of composition. We did division earlier. This is kind of the reverse of it. Fallacy of composition basically says what is true of the parts is also true of the whole. Division was the reverse of that. What's true of the whole is true of its parts, right? Breaking it down. In this case, we're saying what is true of the parts is also true of the whole. Okay? That is not, and again, sometimes it is true, but not necessarily. And again, we're looking for a high degree of certainty in our arguments. Okay? So we cannot say that, again, just because, and my analogy of the fallacy of division works here too. Again, I am made up of atoms. Atoms are invisible. Okay? That is a quality of the part. Invisibility for an atom. They're too small to see. Okay? Since I am composed of atoms, therefore too, that quality, too small to see, must also be true. And in this case, you know it's not true because you're looking at me right now. So that's a false argument as well. Now, another one you will see a lot is something called, I'm going to throw a little Latin out today just because it's fun, post hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay? Wow, Latin. Okay. What does it mean? It means something causes something. Okay? It's a nice, easy way to remember it, right? Something causes something. But not always. Okay? If two things happen in a relatively close sequence, that does not mean that it causes one another. Okay? For example, there are a higher degree of suicides during a full moon. Apparently there's a correlation. Okay? Does that mean the full moon causes suicides? No. At least I don't think so. So, in some cases, events happen and they may seem like they cause something, but they don't. Okay? Let's say, for example, I wear my lucky, when I was a kid, right? I had this lucky baseball cap. Okay? And the first time I wore the baseball cap, I got like I hit a double or something. I was pretty excited, right? So I always had that cap on when I played baseball. Because my assumption was the two events, me putting this cap on for the first time and me getting a hit in the big game, right? So I assumed, illogically, that it was the hat, the wearing of the hat, that caused me to hit the baseball. Okay? That is a false cause, in essence, is what this is. You're assuming something causes something simply because they happen in close sequence. Put on the hat, hit the ball. Okay? The hat, in theory, did not cause the ball to get hit. So this is, again, post hoc ergo propter hoc. Something causes something else. Okay? Not sound reasoning and a good reason to invalidate an argument. You'll see this one a lot. Another one the book talks about is something called the extravagant hypothesis. The extravagant hypothesis means you develop some incredibly lengthy, quite possibly absurd premise when a really simple one will do. That is the equivalent of, have you ever heard of something called Occam's razor? Occam's razor is a medieval premise or a statement that basically says, what the philosopher Occam said is, hey, all things being equal, the simpler explanation is probably the right one. So don't go coming up with all these weird, bizarre, and you see these a lot of times. A good example, the Kennedy assassination, right? An extravagant hypothesis. Some massive government conspiracy with all these people involved. I had a student once, a couple terms ago, that insisted that 9/11 was some massive conspiracy orchestrated by George Bush and Dick Cheney, which involved the military, involved the airlines, involved all these groups. Okay. Possible, and that was his premise. So, because George Bush orchestrated 9/11, premise, therefore he's a bad guy. Now, he may be a bad guy, okay? But this is an extravagant hypothesis, okay? And so anything that follows from such an extravagant hypothesis, you really have to consider as probably not real accurate. So, anyway, that's the extravagant hypothesis. Then, you may also get this. You have a popular false analogy. Okay? People use analogies all the time. They're nice, easy ways to understand things, but a lot of times when you make conclusions and try to make similarities between something that happens and something else, the analogy doesn't quite work. There's going to be one on the quiz. You may or may not get this question. It said something like, raising a child is like growing a tree. You know, sometimes you got to prune it and you got to inflict a little damage on it in order to make it better, right? Because with a tree you got to prune it, snip it. I don't know if it hurts the tree. It probably isn't pleasant. And therefore, because you have to do that, sometimes you have to spank a child. Okay? So the reasoning being, sometimes you have to do damage to a tree in order to make it grow straight. Sometimes therefore you got to do damage to a child in order for him to grow up straight. Okay? That is a false analogy, because I don't know if you know this, and if you have kids, raising a child is in fact not like growing a tree. Okay? It's a false analogy. Just because it does work for growing a tree or a bush and it's okay to snip it and prune it, does not necessarily mean that what works in this situation automatically works in this situation. Okay? That is a false analogy. And you will see those from time to time. Another one that I really like, you see this in politics a lot. It is the slippery slope. The slippery slope works like this. You start off with a reasonable small thing, and you build it and build it and build it into some ridiculous argument. Like, for example, and you do see this a lot in politics. Let's say Senator X supports gun control. Okay? That's fine or not fine, I don't care. Support. So, in order to invalidate him, okay, what you do is you walk down a slippery slope. Well, if he supports gun control, he believes we should take away all our weapons. Therefore, he believes that we should have no way to counteract the government attacking us. Therefore, he must support total totalitarianism and wants the government to totally run our lives. Therefore, you shouldn't vote for him. Okay. The original one, Senator X supports gun control. Okay, you can construct a reasonable argument either for or against that. But walking down this absurd, if he believes in this, then this, then this, then this, building to some absurd conclusion is an invalid form of argument. Okay? The next one your book is going to talk about, and this is a little tricky. It's called the genetic fallacy. Now, what's a genetic fallacy? The genetic fallacy works like this. It says that either some defect in the origin of the claim is evidence enough to refute the claim, or the reverse of that, something supportive in the origin of the claim is reason enough to support it. And usually genetic ones kind of work like this. Let's see. I was raised Roman Catholic, okay? So, therefore, I believe in transubstantiation. It must be true. If you don't know what transubstantiation is, that's the Catholic belief that the little cookie actually turns into the body of Christ and the little wine actually turns into the blood. Literal transformation. So, that to say, but now I'm not saying it's either true or false. That's fine. That's a belief issue. But to say that it is true because, it's the because, okay? It's true because my parents taught it to me, okay? It's true because of the origin of the claim. It originated with my father, therefore it must be true, okay? That is a genetic claim, basically saying that that's why it's true, okay? And that's also not sound reasoning. So we keep doing these, and what we keep finding out is, boy, there's just not a lot of sound arguments out there, right? Another one you see, again, a lot in advertising, is the appeal to authority. In Latin, if you love Latin, and you speak Latin like I do, you would call that ad veracundium, an appeal to false authority. Okay. If you see a celebrity, for example, endorsing a product, is that an appeal? See, you can appeal to proper authority. If indeed the Surgeon General tells you smoking's bad for your health, does the Surgeon General have legitimate authority to make that claim? Sure, that's their job. If I am a teacher in a history class and I tell you that the Germans lost World War II, okay, I have legitimate authority to make those statements. Okay? On the other hand, if Ben Roethlisberger, the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, says, I think you should vote for Barack Obama. I think he's a great president. Okay. By what does Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know this, I don't think Ben Roethlisberger has a degree in political science. I do not think he is an expert in foreign policy, economics, or anything like that. Now, if Ben Roethlisberger says, the way to throw a touchdown pass is to follow this particular form, or whatever, okay, he has legitimate authority there. He can tell you how to throw a touchdown pass. And you see this a lot in advertising. That's what celebrity endorsements are. In many ways, they're appeals to a false authority. They're appealing not to the celebrity's ability to tell you whether or not the product is good or not, but the fact that, well, I like that celebrity, so I'll buy the product. That is false authority. Okay? So that's not sound reasoning, and you do see those a lot. You may also see the always popular appeal to tradition. Okay? Just because something has always been the case, or for many years has been the case, does not necessarily mean it should always be the case. We ran into this very recently at work. Okay, we used to be closed on Veterans Day here. We've been closed on Veterans Day for years. And then, a couple years ago, all of a sudden, we look at our calendar, voila, we're open on Veterans Day. So, we're trying to figure out, okay, why is that? And of course, we'd like to have the other holiday. So we're going to construct an argument why we should be closed on Veterans Day. Okay? And you could construct a legitimate argument based on a number of factors. But, if your only argument is, well, we've always been closed on Veterans Day. Therefore, we should be closed on Veterans Day. That is an appeal to tradition. It's always been done that way. And again, that may seem like, well, sure, we should. But sometimes, if you use the appeal to tradition, it's often been used to justify negative things. Okay? Well, we've always had slavery. Therefore, we should not abolish slavery. That is an argument based on an appeal to tradition, which is certainly a false argument. Okay. Only a couple more here. The is-ought fallacy. Just because something is currently the case does not mean it should or ought to be the case. Okay? There is, let me think of a good one for this, is-ought. It is the case that there is a high degree of teen pregnancy. Okay? They ought to be sterilized. Okay? So you can use the is-ought to state something is and then ought to be or ought not to be, but one does not necessarily command the other to be true. Okay? Just because something is the case doesn't necessarily mean it ought to be the case. Okay, only a couple more. The bandwagon. The bandwagon fallacy means that if you agree with something, you should agree to something because everyone agrees to it. It'll make you popular. Okay, 9 out of 10 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. I don't know. So everyone's doing it, right? Or if you support candidate X, everyone else supports candidate X, so you should too. Parents and children run into this all the time. My son comes up to me the other day and he's like, "Hey Dad, can I stay up till midnight?" I'm like, "No, you can't stay up till midnight." His response, "Well, all my friends are staying up till midnight. And, they like their parents because they let them do nice things. If you let me do nice things, that would be better because then I'd be happy and I'd like you more." Interesting argument. Still can't stay up till midnight. Okay? So, which by the way, my response is my reasoning wasn't good in my response either, by the way. There is another fallacious reasoning called the appeal to force. Okay? It's ad baculum in Latin. Which is basically the do what I say or there will be consequences. Do what I say or you're going to get punished. So sometimes there are veiled threats like give me an A or I'm going to report you to the dean that you're a rotten teacher. That's a threat. There are many reasons why I should give you an A. Most of them dealing with your ability to do work. But using some veiled threat, or there's also the appeal to pity. In Latin, that is ad misericordiam. I love these, because I'll get these periodically, right? Oh, if I don't get an A in this class, I'll lose my financial aid and I'll have to quit school. Okay. But that is not sound, because the implication is, oh, I should give you a better grade because you've had bad times or whatever. Okay? Not sound reasoning. Okay? And finally, the last one they have is the appeal to ignorance. the appeal to ignorance basically means this. If you can't prove it's false, then it must be true. If you can't prove it's true, then it must be false. Okay? I have never seen an angel. Okay? Therefore, angels do not exist. Okay? Angels may or may not exist based on, and you could probably construct some logical argument, probably only one way on that. But the reason angels don't exist cannot be proven simply by the fact that I haven't seen one yet. You know, I've never actually physically been to the moon, but I'm pretty sure it's there. So, anyway, those encompass many of the faults in logic, faults in reasoning that we're looking at this week. Earlier in the week, we were looking at form, categorical syllogisms. If they're not in the right form, the argument's invalid. Now, we're moving a little bit beyond that. We're looking at the content. And we're saying unless there are a number of ways to construct an argument. The most sound arguments are the syllogisms. All SSP, no SSP, therefore blah, blah, blah. Okay? Those are sound deductive arguments. And what you want to get good at is picking up errors in reasoning. Therefore, by extension, improving your own ability to reason deductively. So, I hope you found this video a little bit helpful. Please make sure, as I said, you check out my video on the quiz, the review for the quiz, which I think you'll find pretty helpful. Again, if you like the videos, let me know. If you find them not helpful at all, let me know. Either way, because if you like them, I'll keep doing them. If you don't like them, I'll stop. Anyway, have a great week. Everything's been going well so far. Great job on the discussions. Keep up the good work. And that's it for this week.